Hola mis amigos, we're making a simple, low-carb, flourless pizza. So I just received this huge 15-inch ceramic pizza stone from Culinary Couture. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you guys the low-carb pizza recipe that I use. And I've been using it for quite some time, but of course I use a pizza pan with some parchment paper, but I've never had the opportunity to use a pizza stone. So that is what we are going to be doing today. And I also got from Culinary Couture their 4-piece spatula set because I really needed some spatulas and mine are pretty worn out, so I'm going to be using the large spatula for this recipe. Now I am cautiously optimistic about using this recipe for this pizza stone because this is ceramic, it is very porous, and we are going to be making a flourless low-carb pizza, which you know low-carb items are typically full of fat. And since this is porous, you don't want to have a lot of fat draining into your pizza stone because you are not to wash your pizza stone with any soap. You're supposed to just use liquid, and you don't want a lot of fat that's getting stuck in there. And it does specifically say here in their instructions to never use soap, and it says do not oil your stone or let any excess fat drip into it, and to use flour. But we're not going to be doing that. I'm going to take the risk and see what happens. So it does say that we do want to go ahead and wash our stone with water for the first use, and then we're going to place it into the oven for about 1 to 2 hours to dry it before we actually go ahead and use this. And this is safe in the oven for temperatures up to 1000 degrees. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and wipe this down with some water, place it in the oven for a little bit to dry it out, and then when it's ready we will go ahead and prepare our crust. My oven is preheated to 400 degrees and the pizza stone is doing its thing right now. So what we are going to do is go ahead and start to make our dough for this. So this is going to be super simple, and this is not going to be like your typical keto fathead dough. I'm not hating on that recipe at all because I definitely used that for quite some time and it is delicious. It's just that I find that it can be a little bit tedious because you have to melt your cheese and then try to mix that with your almond flour and try not to scramble your eggs, and it's just a lot of work really. So this one cannot be any easier. So here we have 2 cups or 8 ounces of cheese. You can pretty much use whatever cheese you want. I am using today a combination of Colby Jack and sharp cheddar cheese. But again, you can use whatever cheese you desire. I usually always use some sort of sharp cheddar with mine, but that's just my preference. It all works regardless. So next to this, what we are going to add is just to give this a little flavor. This is totally optional, but I have some garlic powder, some red pepper flakes, and some Italian seasoning. And I didn't measure any of this, so I can't really tell you anything, but it looks like it's about a teaspoon of each of those. And again, that's just to give our crust some flavor. You don't have to do that at all. And next what we're going to do is just add our eggs. Now this is an easy recipe to remember. The ratio is for every cup of cheese that you're using, you are going to use 1 egg. So since we're using 2 cups of cheese, we are going to be using 2 eggs. So I'm just going to add those 2 eggs right in. And guess what, guys? That is literally it. That's the recipe. So we are going to go ahead and get this all mixed up. By the way, check out our spatula here. I was surprised to see that it is fully silicone all the way through. I thought the handle would be separate. So looks good, feels good so far. So now we're just going to use our spatula here just to get our seasonings, the egg and cheese combined. And you just want to get this to be nice and wet. You want the egg to be on every bit of the cheese. So if anything, this is really the work of the recipe. There's really nothing else to it. And then we're going to go ahead and get our pizza stone out, and then we're going to lay this out onto that stone and create our crust. And no, this is not going to taste eggy at all. I do not like any eggy breads or any recipes like that. For a while there was, that famous cloud bread going around in the low carb community. I just can't. It just doesn't, it's too eggy for me. This is not like that at all. And we've added some extra seasonings to really bump things up. So let's go ahead and get our pizza stone and spread this out and create our crust. We are back and our pizza stone is nice and clean out of the oven. Now I didn't want to completely soak this because for the sake of this video I wanted it to dry pretty quickly. So I just took a damp cloth and cleaned the surface of it with that and then placed it in the oven for about a half hour. And now we are ready to go ahead and add our crust. So again, we are not supposed to be using super fatty ingredients with this. So I am a little nervous about it because I am breaking the rules a bit. But I mean, that is my lifestyle. So let's just hope for the best here. So now all we have to do is take that crust that we have created, and I'm going to try to go right in the center here, and we're going to just spread that around. Doesn't get any simpler than that. So there's no rolling dough or anything. We are letting the cheese do all of the work for us by simply melting. And you just want to spread this out nice and thin. I like to personally use the spatula because it gets it straight to the thinness level that we want, to where it's not paper thin, but it's thin enough to be a pizza. And we're just going to try to get this evenly distributed. And what's great about using cheese is that you don't have to be perfect, because any holes or anything will fill itself out. Okay, so we've got our crust pretty spread out here. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle or anything like that. Just make the crust however you like. Now again, this is a 15-inch pie stone or pizza stone. And the pizza or the dough that I have prepared here is about 12 inches currently, and it's a pretty thin crust. So again, you can use whatever thickness you prefer, but I spread it out enough to make a 12-inch pizza. So we're going to place this into our 400-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. The cook time typically varies depending on what cheese we are working with, but the point is you just want to make sure you don't see any of the individual shredded cheese pieces anymore. You want everything to kind of melt into this one homogeneous thing. So just gonna keep your eye on it until it looks right, until it looks like a pizza dough. And again, we are using a pizza stone, so I am not too sure about how the fat is going to drain away, because usually the fat gives us that non-stick surface that we want so that we can easily manipulate the crust. But on a pizza stone, I'm hoping it's not going to absorb too much of the fat and cause our dough to stick to it, but trial and error, we will find out. So into the oven we go for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will be back and see what we have for a crust. All right, so we are back and our pizza crust is out of the oven and it was in there for about 15 minutes. And this is the part of Cooking Amigo that you guys rarely get to see. This is when you see our failures, because exactly what I was worried about happened. I don't know if you can see it right now on the camera, but you can see here on the edges the amount of fat. Now this is usually a very fatty recipe, but unfortunately it looks like the pizza stone soaked the fat into the pizza stone itself, and that takes away from a lot of our non-stick power when it comes to this flourless crust. So unfortunately, that means that it is not lifting up, because I should have no problem just simply touching it and you will be able to lift up your crust. But this crust is stuck to this pizza stone, unfortunately, so you will need to use parchment paper when working with this pizza stone if you are using a low carb recipe or a flourless recipe. Of course, this isn't designed for that. This was an experiment and I did go into this expecting that to happen. But I am going to go ahead and redo this right now with parchment paper so that you can see how the recipe works. But just to show you the failure here, I mean, this is not coming up. And I have already tried with an offset spatula to try to kind of get in there, but it's just destroying the crust really badly. So unfortunately, again, I am going to have to scrap this, and then I am going to place a piece of parchment paper on here, do everything that I just did with you, and then I will come back to you, and hopefully this time we won't have a stuck crust. So I'm going to go ahead and dispose of this, clean the stone again, and then we will be back hopefully with our better crust. But again, not to discourage the stone or anything like that. I had no business really doing a flourless crust on this, but I thought it would be a good experiment, and it failed. And a lot of times I have a lot of recipes that fail, I just don't show them to you. This time you get to see that in action, but we will be back with a better crust in just a moment. Okay, so we are back, and it really did hurt to have to scrap all of that, but you saw how easy it was to make, so I just whipped it right back up, and this time I have a little bit of parchment paper on the bottom, and now it comes right up. So this is what it should look like. You should be able to easily lift your entire crust straight off with no problem. Now I am tempted to go ahead and remove the parchment paper now that the crust is done and cook onto the stone, but I'm afraid to have another disaster, so I'm just going to work with what I have here with the parchment paper. One thing that I do have to say is that I did cook this again for for 15 minutes, and I find that even with the parchment paper, using the stone over a pan seems to kind of cook it quicker, because as you can see it's pretty brown. I kind of overcooked it a bit, but that's not going to be a problem with the way that I do my toppings, because I don't leave a crust edge. I like to have toppings from edge to edge, so I don't have to worry about my crust burning any further in the oven. So now we are going to go ahead and top this. As with any other pizza crust, the crust is always the base, and then you can do whatever you want to it. You can treat this just like any normal crust. Today I'm just going to be basic and make a pepperoni pizza, but sometimes I do go ahead and make up a low-carb Alfredo sauce and get some shredded chicken and do sort of a chicken Alfredo pizza. This recipe is completely versatile and you can do what you want. I just couldn't be bothered today to take all of those extra steps of frying, sausage or anything like that. So again, we're just going to do a pepperoni pizza. So we're going to start by spreading on some low-carb pasta sauce. How do you like your sauce? I like my pizza to be kind of sauce heavy. And again, you can leave a crust edge if you like, sort of like this. You know, you would leave a 1 inch to a 1/2 inch or so edge, but I'm not doing that. I'm spreading my sauce all over the entire crust. We will have edge to edge toppings here. Next, we have our mozzarella, some freeze-dried basil and chives, our pepperoni, and some grated Parmesan. So now all that we need to do is to place this into the oven just to get everything to melt down a bit. And that usually takes about 10 minutes. So we're going right back into our 400-degree oven for 10 minutes, and we should have a completed pizza. So we are back, and I am really living dangerously today because I decided to change my mind. Just before putting it into the oven, I did go ahead and remove the parchment paper. I just slid the pizza off of the parchment paper because I really did want to cook directly onto the pizza stone because, you know, that's sort of the whole point here. And guess what, guys? It actually did work out. So it is not stuck at all to the pizza stone. So I do have to say that if you are going to be making a flourless pizza, you do want to start with parchment paper to build your crust. But once you have an established crust, you can place that directly onto the stone, add your toppings, and then enjoy all of the benefits of using a pizza stone in the first place. And this did cook up very nice and quickly. And I'm finding that using the pizza stone, I get a very crispy crust. It's much crispier than when I usually make pizza on a pizza pan. So I would say that even though we did have a little bit of a disaster at first, this is an amazing way to make pizza. I will be using the pizza stone from now on, now that I've kind of figured out how it's going to work for my lifestyle. But if you are making a traditional pizza, I don't see you having any issues with sticking whatsoever. But I'm very pleased with the results that I have so far. So I turned off the camera, but then I realized that you guys would not let me get away with not cutting the pizza and showing you what it looks like. So I did go ahead and just cut the pizza with a normal pizza cutter. And here we are. Just to kind of show you, whoops, I'm out of frame. So there is our wonderful pizza. It is a little heavy right now because 1, it hasn't cooled, and 2, I do have a lot of cheese on top, so it looks like it's kind of flimsy at the moment because, again, this is hot. But if you let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, this will be just like any normal pizza. But it is holding up pretty well right now. And let's go ahead and take a bite. Oh yeah, that is wonderful. So here's the back. If you want to see the bottom there, it is nice and browned because, again, using the pizza stone, it became pretty crispy and cooked up a lot quicker than I'm used to, but it still worked out. And it is delicious. Wow, it's very crispy actually the more that I enjoy it. I do like it better on the pizza stone for sure versus the pan. If you're interested in using a pizza stone or are in the market for any other kitchen utensils, I will have links in the description box below for you to check out Culinary Couture. I definitely highly recommend using a pizza stone. If you cook a lot of pizza, then it's definitely worth dedicating a piece of cookware specifically for the pizza. And of course, this can be used for flatbreads or anything else that goes into the oven. And I just wanted to come back because in that short time that I have been speaking with you, the pizza has cooled quite a bit. And you can see now that that slice that I cut earlier is holding up a lot better. Still pretty hot right now, but it has cooled and it is definitely holding up. So these remaining slices, especially if you refrigerate this and you decide to reheat this later, no problem at all. This crust holds up fantastically, and if I'm brutally honest, I actually prefer this to the fathead dough. Keto pizza, enjoy, and I'll see you at the dinner table.